Trigger warning. This episode contains content that may be alarming to some listeners. Please make sure to check the show notes for more detailed descriptions and take care of yourself. On this episode, we speak with Juanita, who had care in both Hyogo and Osaka prefectures.
I'm pretty sure it was like 40 hours, 42 hours of labor.
With all of her pregnancies, she was of an older age.
I was 40 and I just knew if this is it. This is my last chance.
And although she lost hope after losing baby number 2, she regained strength and had a wonderful experience with baby number 3.
I just remember, I'm getting warm fuzzies and goosebumps just remembering and thinking about it.
Hello and welcome to Birth Stories of Japan. Juanita, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm really great. Thanks.
Awesome. I'd love if we could start with a little bit of an introduction. So just you, your family, a little bit about you guys.
Okay, so my name is Juanita and I live I always still think of it as North Osaka, but we are technically across the river into Hyogo Prefecture. But I have lived in Japan for almost 20 years, so I'm always kind of Osaka girl at heart. My husband is Japanese and he's from Hiroshima Prefecture, so he's actually a transplant here as well. I am a wellness coach. I have my own business, and he also works for himself in landscaping. And we have 2 children. I have a 9-year-old girl, Hinata Joy, and a 2-year-old boy, Kita Hunter.
Beautiful. That's awesome. And I'd love to know a little bit more about your wellness coaching. Do you want to just explain that a bit?
Sure. So this is something that I'm really excited about and really passionate about. I actually have just started it this year. So if any listeners are looking for a wellness coach in Japan, please look me up. But yeah, I basically am mostly hoping to help the English-speaking community in Japan deal with I think of them as the cataclysms of life. So whether they be good or bad, any big changes, can really kind of throw us for a loop. And sometimes we can use some extra support, kind of getting back onto our path. And also just daily stress that I think is very unique to our situation living in Japan as foreigners. So I'm kind of into the mindfulness, self-compassion, mental health side of things, but I am trained in a variety of areas. So exercise, diet, nutrition, sleep, energy, all that kind of good stuff.
That is so awesome. So I'll get your details for that and I'll chuck it in the show notes. So if anyone wants to get in contact with you, they can look you up. Yeah, that's so amazing. What an awesome resource to have.
Yeah, thanks. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, cool. All right. So I'd love to get into your birth journeys now. So let's start with your eldest. Let's talk about your journey to pregnancy with her.
Okay, so with all of my pregnancies, but starting with the first, it was not an easy task to get pregnant. With my first, we just tried for, I think it was about 3 years between when we really started to try. We weren't careful. We were actively trying, kind of. I actually, again, with all of my pregnancies, I had already kind of given up hope. Maybe it's just not in the cards for us. It doesn't seem to be happening. And then, of course, that's when I got pregnant. I think I was 11 weeks before I actually went for my first visit. So I have always had irregular cycles. So it wasn't that odd to be late. But yeah, I distinctly remember Googling phantom period symptoms. And yeah, it was like, well, you might be pregnant. And I was like, well, I guess I could be technically. So I got a pregnancy test. And I remember the morning that I took it, and it's a little embarrassing to say it, but we were big party people. So he was like a bartender. We both drank a lot. We were still smoking. And I just remember like shoving the pregnancy test in his face. And I was like, look at this. And he's like, what? Like, he doesn't even know what it is, you know? And he was just like, what? And I'm like, look at this. I'm pregnant. And he was like, what? And we're both like smoking a cigarette on the couch. Like, holy crap. What are we going to do? Like, we can't believe it. I will say, though, I was able to quit smoking within the week. So that was very, very good and important to me to do. So, but yeah, it was a very happy, joyous event.
Oh, that's awesome. And then, so how about your pregnancy? Did you have any symptoms? What clinic did you go to, and how was the care there?
Okay, so my pregnancy, actually, I feel like I was really, really lucky. I did not have any morning sickness with any of my pregnancies. I'm one of those rare unicorn pregnant women. But in my first trimester, I do remember I was, like so tired, like had to come home and take a nap for several hours every afternoon, tired. And I, was pretty emotional, but then once I knew I was pregnant, that kind of explained that. And I went to the Mino Ladies Clinic in Osaka, northern Osaka, and it was great. We actually, because we had no idea what we were doing, me being a foreigner in Japan and a first-time mom, and my husband being a man, we didn't know kind of like what the standard process was when you find out you're pregnant. So what happened was, I still live very close to the border between Osaka and Hyogo prefectures. So I found out I was pregnant. I asked a girlfriend for a recommendation to an OBGYN to get the test. She gave me one, but that was in Hyogo prefecture. So I went and got all of the first tests done and had to pay out of pocket. And then when my husband started researching, like, okay, so where are we going to give birth? It's like, well, we should get our checkups in Osaka. So then he found a clinic in this like city across the river, but technically in Osaka prefecture. So I then had all the tests again and had to pay out of pocket. But that clinic was just a small clinic. You can't give birth there. So then I had to go to the third and final Mino Ladies Clinic because I could deliver there. So it was a bit of a process in the beginning, but I mean, we just had no idea what was going on. But once we found them, I do remember I am American, and I was like, I need to have the option of anesthesiology. Is that the English word?
Sure, the epidural.
Yes, Thank you. Epidural, yes. I really wanted to have the option to have an epidural, but again, I had no idea what it's like in Japan. So when I asked at the Mino Ladies Clinic with the first doctor I saw, it was a female doctor. And it was my first experience of realizing requesting the female doctor is not always the wisest course of action. She was really harsh. And she was just like, well, we don't do that here, but you'll be fine. Like, it's no big deal. And I just burst into tears in the office and was like, no, it is a big deal. Like, I am freaking out. I'm a first-time mom. So luckily, my husband was with me, and the nurses were very kind. And after we left the office, the nurses were telling us, well, here is a clinic that does offer epidurals. They gave us the information. But then when my husband and I investigated, it was like, well, it's really kind of far away to get to via public transportation. So for me to go by myself, it was just going to be a lot of work to get there. And then I found out that they don't offer epidurals outside of Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. So I just kind of readjusted my thinking and tried to get prepared for a natural birth. and I stuck with ladies clinic. So I switched doctors, and I had a delightful, kind, very nice male doctor after that. And I had, a pretty uneventful pregnancy. Baby girl was breech up towards the end, but it was never a real issue. She flipped around and I had no idea. The doctor gave me some exercises. He did say to scrub the bathroom scrub out the bathtub because that upside down angle would help. And I was like, I am not scrubbing no bathtub. Like 8 months pregnant. There is no way.
Yeah.
But that was when the male doctor-ishness came through. But yeah, pregnancy wise, it was uneventful and everything was okay.
Yeah. Perhaps we'll talk about your birth story now. So how did labor start for you?
So I had 2 due dates. So actually I thought I had another week or so, but she turned out to be closer to the wrong due date. So anyway, I thought I had time. I didn't realize I was having contractions, but in the end, that's what they were. But it just started very, very slow at first. My husband went to work and I couldn't sleep and I was starting to get scared. And so luckily he was able to come home, and we called the clinic at I think it was 4:00 in the morning, and they told us to come in. So we got there. So I guess Sunday morning at around 4 a.m. And I just was in low level labor forever. They had a labor delivery recovery room, and that's where I was all day Sunday and through Sunday night. And then Monday morning, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm so exhausted, and this isn't even the hard part. They made me stay in bed because they wanted to keep a monitor on the baby.
Right.
So I had read all these natural birthing books about, changing positions and walking around and different things you could do. And I really couldn't do any of that there. So Monday morning at 9, when the doctor came in, he finally was there to check on me, and he gave me Pitocin maybe to speed contractions along. So after that, it was just a blur. They kicked me out of my room because 2 more moms came in. They only had 2 rooms and I was taking forever. So they kind of put me in a back room. And it was excruciating. It was really, really painful. I was so exhausted, and the drugs that increased the contractions were really, really painful. It was all in my back. So I could not lie down. So I was kind of in a reclining position the whole time. I was on the operating room table, the bed, and the doctor and the nurses were kind of like, what should we do? Her water still hasn't broke. And then, huge gush, it broke then. So finally, I went into active labor, and my husband was with me. But I do remember when she finally came down and was coming out that I was like, your body just knows what to do, it's just, it really is, So it wasn't, it was fast once active labor really started. The only thing that I was not impressed with was, the doctor gave me an episiotomy. Thank you. Without saying anything. Didn't warn me, didn't ask. Just, I'm in active labor. I'm so exhausted. And that was the only thing that was truly painful. He just cut with no warning. And I shouted out in English, just, no! And then she was out. So she was born in 2014. On March 17th. She is a St. Patrick's baby. She was 3,168 grams. I'm pretty sure it was like 40 hours, 42 hours of labor in the end. So then they whisked her away, and my husband went with the nurse to give her her first bath and wash her up while the doctor delivered the placenta and then stitched me up. So that was the only really unpleasant and unfortunate aspect, I thought. But again, I didn't really have a birth plan. I don't know if it would have mattered or not. I thought it was kind of a given that baby would be placed on my chest, like my bare chest, you know. And I kept trying to like unbutton my gown because they gave her to me, but all swaddled up. But I wanted to at least unwrap my chest, and like that didn't really happen. So I was kind of sad about that. But we got back to the room fairly soon, and then I did after that.
And so how about your recovery? What was that like?
So yeah, that also was pretty smooth. Like I didn't have any physical problems really. They took good care of me in the clinic. And yeah, I think physically and emotionally, I was pretty okay, relatively so.
Nice. And so, you know how during the pregnancy you were quite anxious about it all? Did that kind of go away after the birth?
No, no, not at all. So I wanted to try exclusively breastfeeding. That was important to me. And as soon as she was born, I think we got off to a pretty good start. I had a lot of like soreness and tenderness though. And in that clinic, I did have a private room, which was quite lovely, but they were big into formula. And I was asking like the midwives and the nurses for help, and some of them were helpful and some of them were kind of dismissive. And they were like, well, you need something like, you know, some kind of salve to put on that, but then they weren't offering anything. And like one told me of this kind of Japanese, whatever, the Bayou. It's like, I don't know, like really hardcore Vaseline, I guess, or something. But at least she told me the name of it so I could tell my friend who brought me some. Anyway, so, and then she didn't pee for the first 24 hours. So the doctors and nurses were worried about her, you know, like getting enough fluids or whatever. So they kind of forced me to start giving her sugar water. And I would always offer the breast first, and then I'd give her the sugar water, and then she would like almost every time spit it up. So I'm like, I don't think she needs this. But then when my milk did come in, they were like, wow, she's drinking so much. And I mean, because she gained weight really quickly. And my milk was plentiful, and, you know, we had a really great relationship with breastfeeding after that. But I think that kind of lack of support, or maybe just validation in the hospital, was the first step in me just kind of worrying about everything. I was very nervous first time mom.
Yeah, sure. That's fair enough. And so how about we move then to baby number 2? So what was your journey to pregnancy like then?
Okay, so pregnancy number 2, again, it took us several years to get pregnant. I think maybe when first baby was around 3 years old, we hadn't gotten pregnant again yet, and I was getting older. So I did go to the Mino Ladies Clinic to get some blood work done to make sure that, you know, my hormone levels were okay. Again, I had irregular periods, so there was several times that I thought I must be pregnant. I'm so late. And, you know, home pregnancy tests would say that I'm not, but it's like, well, I have to be. There's no other, you know, answer. But I did get on a medication to try and bring my cycles into a more routine cycle, I guess, or something, so that we could plan, a bit better. Unfortunately, around the same time, my husband started working in another prefecture. So that kind of put an end to that because, there's very specific timing and he couldn't always get away. So I stopped taking the medication and I kind of gave up. And then he came back home 13 months later and we got pregnant right away after he came back. But again, I had no idea. I didn't think it was possible. So at this point, I would have been 40 years old. So I thought, that's just not going to happen. But it did. And so it was, amazing, just so happy. My husband couldn't believe it. My daughter was so excited. She was 4 or 5 at this time. So yeah, so it was really, really happy.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And then, so do you want to go through the pregnancy and how that progressed?
Yes. So, again, I didn't have any first trimester symptoms. I didn't have any morning sickness or anything like that. But then one night, pretty early on, maybe I was around 11 weeks, I started bleeding and I thought I was having a miscarriage and I freaked out and my husband called the clinic and they wanted to talk to me, I think, to, hear the level of alarm in my voice. But basically they told us to come in. Once there, the doctor checked and he said, the baby's fine. I still see the heartbeat. Sometimes this happens. It should be okay. Just go home and come back tomorrow during regular office hours. But you need to stay on bed rest. So that was the beginning of 5 weeks of bed rest for me. And of course, I was terrified the whole time, but I knew the best thing I could do for the baby was to be as relaxed as I could. So I binge watched It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and I was just bleeding off and on like the whole time. And I thought like, this is not normal. But then when I would go in for my checkups, they'd say, well, baby's still okay. The heartbeat's still there. Just stay on bed rest. Until around week 16, I went in for my regular checkup. And all of a sudden, the doctor was like, you need to go to a bigger hospital. So I just remember not really understanding or obviously not realizing how serious it was because he was trying to send me to a hospital pretty far away in Osaka Prefecture because they have an ICU. And I was like, no, that's really inconvenient. How about this hospital that's closer to home? So I got in a taxi and went to that first hospital closer to home and had to do the whole hoopla. And as soon as I finally got in to see them, they were like, we can't deal with this. And that's when I started to realize that something might be seriously wrong. So I still ended up going to the big hospital. It's the Toyonaka Shiritsu Byoin, so the public hospital in Toyonaka. It's really great, wonderful care there, wonderful doctors and staff. But I was, of course, freaked out at that point. I got my husband on the phone and I got him to come meet me there. And then when they finally saw us, and the doctor told me that basically all of the amniotic fluid had leaked out. So I still don't really understand if that had been happening since I started bleeding or if it happened, suddenly towards the end or whatever. But so that is what she told us. And I was really upset, of course, as was my husband. But at that point, I basically thought that we were waiting to have a miscarriage. I thought it was just kind of a waiting game. But she did come back out while we were kind of, dealing with that news and trying to figure out what to do. And she did say, we have beds available if you want to be admitted. We can do that. There is a risk of infection, but I know you have a daughter at home. You guys can decide, basically. And because my understanding was that I was basically waiting to have a miscarriage, and I was 16 weeks at that point, I was terrified of that happening at home. And I wanted to be in the hospital with professionals and with help. So I wouldn't have to go through that alone at home. I'm sorry.
No.
But, so they admitted me. And then, they would come and do the rounds every morning, and they would check on the baby's vitals. And I just remember thinking, why isn't there a bigger note in my chart about what's going on? Because, the nurses would come and be like, oh, he's got such a strong, healthy heartbeat. And I'm like, I thought this was a hopeless pregnancy. I thought this was the end kind of a thing. So I was very confused and obviously very emotional, and trying my best to understand what was happening with my not fluent Japanese. In the end, they said that it was probably CAOS, CAOS, a very rare syndrome. And so there was that whole, why me? It's less than 1% of pregnancies. Anyway, in the end, the bleeding had more or less stopped. And after 5 days there, the doctor had talked to me and my husband several times. And basically, she said, you need to have a family discussion and decide what you would like to do. And I didn't quite understand that at first. But in Japan, you have up until week 22 to terminate a pregnancy voluntarily. And that is basically what we were faced with. And it was the most horrible, impossible decision, because this baby was so wanted, for 4 years, we had been trying to get pregnant again, and I was 40, and I just knew, if this is it, this is my last chance, this is my last baby. But I Googled the crap out of everything I could. My phone was hot, between researching what I could and constantly texting my best friend. And in the end, it was just, there was no way that the amniotic fluid would be replenished. And without that, his lungs couldn't develop. He wouldn't be able to move and practice and just grow and develop naturally like babies are supposed to. And it would just be a really tortured existence, I thought, for him, for us, for everybody. So yeah, in the end, I just thought, this is the one thing that I could do for him and for our family. So we decided to terminate the pregnancy. And so I came home for a few days and then was readmitted to have that procedure and to give birth to him. Sorry.
We're both in tears, and I just wish
I know, it's a
I
sad
wish I was
story.
there to give you a big hug because, oh my gosh, that's such a tough decision
Yeah.
to be faced with, and I can't even imagine. Can't even imagine. So I'm just really feeling for you right now.
Thank you.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
And then so how, when you got readmitted, how was that for you?
So again, the doctors and the staff, they were amazing. Like, they're really, really great at that hospital, and I do appreciate that. I had like a private room, like the first time I was admitted, and then the second time I had a room with another mom that was on bed rest. They, I think, intentionally made sure I wasn't like with new babies and stuff, but we didn't know he was a boy until he was born. But he was born, it would have been 2019, November 15th. And he was born whole and beautiful, and we could see him afterwards. And I thought he looked just like his big sister. He was born at 18 weeks, so he was really teeny tiny. But again, like, I appreciated the staff and their care and their understanding and their empathy. They were really kind about and helpful about everything that, you know, I needed to do and that our family needed to do. And so it was really, really intense. I don't know how it would be in America, but, you know, it was what it was in Japan. So after I gave birth to him, I still needed to stay in the hospital for 5 days for recovery. But I will say that I was actually glad I had that time away from my family and the hospital to be alone, because I think it helped me to come to terms with things as best I could and to grieve as much as I needed to. I did appreciate that time to just grieve and cry and write and, you know, do what I needed to do.
Oh, I'm so glad that you got that time. And can I ask, did you have a specific way that helped you get through that grief, or did you memorialize him in any way?
So when he was born, they asked us, and we said yes, please, but they were able to make his handprints and his footprints for us. So I have those. I have, not to be too weird or morbid, but he was old enough that we had him cremated in the traditional Japanese way, and we have saved his bones. So I have his bones and his footprints, and I have like a little shrine. We named him, and he's part of our family. Like, he came home with us. And so my daughter and my husband and I, we all, we put letters in with him and decorated with flowers, and I made him a little baby blanket and stuff before he was cremated. So we were able to do culturally, I guess, the Japanese cultural things, and that helped. And I think just having the time, like I said, to face it head on, you know, it really helped. Yeah. Months later, much later, I also joined a grief support group and things like that. And that's helped as well to process it later as I was more and more ready to face it.
Oh my gosh. I just want to give you all
I
the
know.
hugs.
I'm sorry. Very, very long
hugs.
story. Long, heartbreaking story.
It's such an important story to talk about, and I know that it will definitely help others out there. So thank you so much for being brave enough to speak about it and share it today.
Thank you. I think it does help me to talk about it because it's really hard. But
Sure.
yeah, I think there are lots of stories like that. So I'm happy to share if it will help anyone.
Thank you so, so much. And so back on a positive note, let's talk about your baby number 3. You call him your miracle baby. Is that it in your notes?
Yes. So obviously, heartbreak and utter disappointment and everything. And I was 40 at that time. So I truly thought that's why it was just so ultimately heartbreaking. It's like I really thought I will not get another chance. So I went to a clinic. I got on some meds to try and regulate my cycle. I was taking, ovulation predictor kits, all these kinds of different things before involving more interventions, I guess. And the medicine didn't work. Like my period did not get regulated. And it was just like, this isn't going to happen. I had one more ovulator kit. I took it when I thought I should. It actually showed up as positive. And I was like, wow, first time it had ever happened. So we tried, and I had, pregnancy kits as well. And again, I just completely did not believe it. I took a pregnancy test. There was a line. I threw it away. I just didn't believe it. And then I did that the next day. And the next day, and the next day. And the line was getting darker and darker. And then I was beyond elated. The other crazy thing is that this second baby, the pregnancy and everything, it was only 1 week different than baby number 2. So I conceived 1 year, 1 week later or earlier, I forget which. So yeah, they had almost the same due date, 1 year apart, and all of that. So it was just really, really amazing.
Awesome. Oh, I'm so happy for you guys. And then how did your pregnancy continue on from then?
Okay, so as you can imagine, I was completely elated and so thankful and grateful, but also completely terrified. I went to the same hospital, the Toyonaka Public Hospital, City Hospital, because they did have the NICU. And because of my previous pregnancy and my age, I was considered a high-risk pregnancy. But to their credit, they never really brought it up. It was just this happened before, but that's not this pregnancy. I didn't have any symptoms morning sickness. By this point, had started getting into mindfulness and meditation. So I woke up early before anyone else in the house, and I meditated every morning. I tried to just take care of myself. I did stop exercising, though, because I was just scared. I just didn't want to take any risks. I also stopped working pretty early. His due date was in the end of April, and I stopped working in February. And that was, it was really a lovely pregnancy. Yeah.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
So how did labor start for you this time?
I had heard that skint babies or, babies after your first come faster. I was really hoping it wouldn't take as long as Big Sister. I get huge when I'm pregnant. I'm a very small person, and I just become all baby. I was so big. I was so ready for him to come out. And one night, I just was going to sleep, and I thought, I gotta pee. And then I stood up and was like, that's not pee. My water broke. So they were like, come in right away. COVID protocols were in place. So my husband and my daughter both, they couldn't come. They couldn't enter the hospital at all, basically. Yeah, so that was like 11:30 or midnight. We arrived at the hospital. They took me to the maternity ward and I labored through the night. I did have to labor by myself, which was hard, of course. But I also just, understood that there was nothing to be done. So I didn't let it bother me too much. And I did have to wear like a mask the entire laboring process though, which was crazy. But then they had like an oxygen mask on top of that. So that helped. And then there was one point during my labor, he flipped upside down. Like they were like, oh, he's breech. Can you labor on all fours? And I was like, okay. So maybe I misunderstood, but they did. They gave me a huge pillow to kind of get on all fours. And then that helped. This time, the doctor asked me, she said, it will probably be easier or happen faster if I cut you. Is that okay? And so she did ask permission and I was like, yes, please just get him out. And then, yeah, as soon as he was born, it was just like instant endorphins and love and oxytocin coursing through my body. I heard him cry from behind me and I was just ecstatic. Like I was just so happy. And they did put him on my chest. Like we got to cuddle skin to skin right away, which I really appreciated. Because I was alone, the nurse took pictures with my phone for me since my husband wasn't there. And then they moved us into the recovery room. And yeah, within a couple hours, the nurse came in and asked if I wanted to try breastfeeding. And I said, yes, I would love to. So we tried, we got started right away. And yeah, he was just perfect. And I just remember, I'm getting like warm fuzzies and goosebumps just remembering and thinking about it. But my little miracle baby was here and he was perfect and I didn't have any problems. Yeah, and it was amazing. It was great.
So cool. I don't know if it's because we've changed cameras or something, but I can see you glowing, like as you're speaking about it.
Well, that's good. I'm glad.
And so, how was your recovery postpartum?
Yeah, so like honestly, I was just buzzing the entire time. I had to share a room with three other women. And that wasn't that terrible. They were really supportive of the breastfeeding. And they knew I was not a first time mom. So they kind of were just like, well, you know what you're doing. They kind of got grumpy a couple times because I brought him into my bed and we would kind of fall asleep after nursing. And that was kind of a no-no. Like, you need to put him back in the bassinet and turn on the alarms and all that kind of stuff. One nurse was nice and she just put up the safety bar. But there was one thing that I wanted to share that was amazing. While I was there with my second pregnancy, I had a main doctor and then kind of like the sub Kohai, kind of younger doctor. All of the doctors were women at this hospital, which I thought was really fascinating and interesting. But they were not my main doctor with the third pregnancy, but they both saw my name and they saw that I was on the floor. And they both at different times came and they were like, Nagai-san, we saw that you're, and it was like the most amazing, touching thing. Like they both were like, we're so happy for you and congratulations. And I was just touched that they remembered me and, remembered my story. But yeah, like one of them gave me a hug. It was really, really, that was really amazing. So it was a great ending to my story, kind of.
That is amazing. And so, do you know how much the cost was for your stays at the hospitals?
The first hospital, so the Mino Ladies Clinic, it was kind of posh. And I think we did have to pay a little out of pocket. But I don't really remember. Being an American, I just remember it's like so cheap compared to what it would be in the States, you know? I do remember that we got the standard government subsidy for all of them. So even baby number 2, he was past a certain number of weeks. And I do remember I was like, oh, well, that's nice. Japan thought to do that. Like the cost of the procedure is the cost that the government gives you for giving birth. So it was considered like a birth. With baby number 3, I think we just had the money sent directly to the hospital. And yeah, so I don't really remember very much.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you for that. And then, so as you said, you've watched a few of the episodes before, but I'm not sure if you saw, I've been doing like these little bottle questions.
Yes.
Yeah. Bottle
Yeah.
time
Okay.
questions. First one. What would you say to someone thinking about having a baby in their 30s or 40s?
Ooh, good question. Well, I would say first and foremost to don't give up hope. I had my third baby 1 month before I turned 42, which is crazy for me to think about. I kind of forget that I am that old, or I was that old. But yeah, so I did conceive him naturally, and I did have a pregnancy without complications. I did also have a pregnancy with complications the year before that, but I don't know that that necessarily had anything to do with my age. I would say, since I had my daughter when I was 35. So she was also kind of almost a late pregnancy. Maybe I was 34. But little kids are lots of work, so it's a lot more exhausting. I think your body adjusts and it does what it needs to do. But yeah, I just think maybe just getting tired more easily, just having the energy to keep up once they're here is probably very different if you're in your 20s or if you're in your 40s.
Right.
But I had both my babies when I was quite a bit older. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for that. And I'll ask one more.
Yeah.
Do you feel like doctors here were understanding of your journey?
As far as my age, I did appreciate both the pregnancies I had at the Toyonaka City Hospital. The doctors didn't even bring it up. Like, it wasn't a big deal. So I appreciated that. It was just like, and it was just a box I ticked off, and it was kind of like, yeah, there's a high risk factor, but not a big deal. In regards to the difficult pregnancy, the doctors were as understanding and kind and empathetic as they could be, while still very much making it kind of like my choice or my decision. But I do remember kind of thinking, I felt like if I was in America and the situation being what it was, unless I was grossly misunderstanding things, I felt like the doctors would have said, we recommend that you terminate this pregnancy because blah, blah, blah. Like in Japan, it was very much like, well, this is what's happened. Now, what are you going to do with it? And maybe it was just such a difficult decision and such an impossible situation that I wanted someone to take the lead or kind of give me a bit more. But yeah, I think overall, especially my second and third pregnancies, I really appreciated the care that I received.
Yeah, oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for just sharing this journey that you've been on. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, you're very welcome.
Have a wonderful day.
Yes, thank you.
See you. So if you'd like to hear more birth stories, please subscribe to this channel. Giving us a like also helps other moms see this video too, so please give us a thumbs up if you can. You can check out the description for more information about bits mentioned in this episode, but if you have any other questions or feedback, please leave a comment below or get in touch. And lastly, if you're a mama that has a story to tell, please send an email to birthstoriesjp@gmail.com. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.